Welcome to Porch Play Chats, sponsored by the American Association for the Child's Right to Play, or more affectionately called IPA USA. IPA USA is the USA affiliate of the International Play Association. And as part of our efforts to promote play, we've introduced Porch Play Chats. These are conversations with people who are just as passionate about play as we are. To find all these Porch Play Chats, go to our website at ipausa.org. In the top right-hand corner is our link to our Facebook page, YouTube channel, and Instagram. So follow us on YouTube, be a friend on Facebook. And what do we do with Instagram?
Follow, I think.
Follow us on Instagram. Thank you. And magically, every Monday, a Porch Play Chat will appear. I'm Deb Lawrence, and I'm president of IPA USA. With me on the porch is Danielle Hunter. Danielle, welcome back.
Hi, Deb. Thank you so much for having me again. I'm happy to be here.
Danielle's been in the field of early childhood education for 15 years, and she's been in every aspect of a teacher, an assistant director, a director, but most recently, she's the director of education for a large multi-state childcare company. What she is most passionate about is bringing awareness to the value of early childhood education and the extremely important role that our teachers play in shaping young children during these early years. She lives in Connecticut with two beautiful daughters, 6 and 4, her husband, and a small herd of animals. We have a small herd of animals as well in our house. And so today, Danielle's going to talk to us about finding evidence of learning in play-inspired environments. And so I think this is critical because, all the parents will sometimes say all they do is play, and teachers don't know how to respond to that. So her opening question that I'm going to ask her is, how do we as parents and educators spot evidence of learning in play? I think this is such an important topic.
It is, and it is so prevalent right now in my work and what I'm doing. I work quite heavily with training teachers and curriculum and the things and the programs that happen within our schools. And so we get a lot of those questions that you said. It's great. The teachers do a great job of playing with the children, but when does the, in quotes, real learning happen? And that phrase real learning is, I think I was thinking about this time with you and I was like, I think it's a pet peeve. It's truly a pet peeve that I have. And it sort of pains me a little bit on the inside when I hear it, because I feel like, we've made some progress in really understanding why play is valuable, but we're still missing the mark in understanding how play and learning are happening together, right? They're not these two separate entities. We don't start our day saying, okay, it's playtime for the first 20 minutes, and now we're going to go into the learning, right? The learning's happening while they're playing and interacting.
Yes, so instead of playing to learn, we should be saying play is learning, right?
Yes.
We need to move that phrase that people use. Oh, children are playing and now we'll go do our teacher directed activity. Well, that's not playing, right? So it's children are playing, and that is how they learn.
Absolutely.
It's not playing to learn. It's that's my pet peeve. It's driving me crazy.
Yes.
We seem to think that they're totally separate paths instead of seeing them as partners.
Exactly. And Amanda Morgan from Not Just Cute does a really great job, at least helping me really visualize what that's like. Is she really phrases it as play is the method to reach those outcomes. So when I visualize it, I almost see like play is a tool in our toolbox, right? We'll use a hammer to get those nails back in, or a wrench to fix a leaky pipe. We use play for learning, to reach those learning outcomes, right? Those things are happening because of play and because of these environments we set up for children. And so enough times of asking, they do great playing, but when does learning happen? It really called my team and I, some other wonderful leaders that I work with, to really sit back and think, like, what are we going to do about this, right? Because we know and we understand that these two things are happening together, but we're missing an opportunity to really make sure that our educators and our school leaders understand it, our parents understand it, but then also the other side of this coin is that we can speak to it, right? That we can speak to it. It's not just enough for me to understand it. I've got to be able to convey that message as a teacher. When a parent comes to me and says, oh, that's great, I saw they played with blocks today, but what kind of learning did you do? Right. I do think sometimes, and I get it, I totally was like this as a teacher. I do think sometimes we can clam up, right? We feel sort of backed into a corner, and like you kind of have that self-doubt, right? Like, did I do the wrong thing? Should I have done it this way instead? And so what we've really been working hard on is really simplifying how you spot the evidence of learning with 5 tools that we all have available to us in some form or fashion. And it's really using our senses, right? So really taking this senses approach to spotting evidence of learning in our classrooms. As I think more about this tool and what we're really trying to advocate for within our schools, in my career and what I do every day, I also think this is very easily mirrored and transfers over to parenting, right? And is a great tool for parents to use and can perhaps give them a new lens to view their child's play from. And so it's really been about thinking, when just using sight, right? Taking each of those individual senses and really pulling them out and individually and thinking, okay, what am I seeing that's evidence of learning, right? When they're in the block center, right? Sure, they're playing and they're building, they're constructing of some sort, but what sort of learning am I seeing, right? And really just honing in on that one single sense and using that for all the environments, right? Even when you're outside, right? Sure, they're seemingly playing in a sand or a mud pit, right? But what else are you seeing, right? What sort of learning do you see happening? And we started to go through these questions and actually created a simple tool for our school leaders that really highlights a couple of those key questions as it pertains to each of those senses. Just asking them to hone in on, okay, what are some of the things that you're hearing, right? What are you hearing young children talk about? What are you hearing them, in terms of problem solving and thinking critically, right? Those are all huge pieces of learning happening.
Yes. I love how simple that is, right? Because I would always, as a teacher, I would go over and sit near dramatic play and I would just write down what they were talking about, right? Language samples. And I would do it. And I would say, Sarah and Billy had this amazing conversation today. Look at all the vocabulary. And parents would go, oh my God, that's amazing. And I say, yes, they were in dramatic play. They were in scene and they were doing this amazing dramatic play experience. And I just happened to capture it and wrote it down so that you could see the progression in that language. And, I would do that for every child in the classroom 3 times a year so that you had it in the beginning, you had it in the middle, and you had it at the end so parents could see that learning. Yeah. As that vocabulary and those conversations went. And then, Bev Boz is, how does your story start? In the first part of a 3-year-old's life, it's like 4 words. At the end of the 3-year-old year, it's probably a couple of paragraphs. And again, visual samples of learning, all based on what I heard, right? Or what I wrote down. So again, that's a beautiful way to frame it.
Yeah, just and again, I mean, as an educator, we are always busy, right? We are always on, and there's a lot going on, especially when you've got a room full of children, and you're wanting to make sure that you're present and it's got all the things that they need to really fully engage themselves in their play and their learning. So we wanted an approach that was truly simple, right? Just truly something that didn't take a lot of time, wasn't a big package you had to go through, just these simple things that we can just use. Again, much of the time, what we already have, our senses, right? So when I walk into a classroom, right, as a parent, if I can smell a fresh batch of Play-Doh, there's a lot of learning that happened there. And I think you brought up such a good point in your example is you were able to speak to parents about that, right? You were able to pull out those language samples and say, hey, listen to what I heard happening in dramatic play today. And I think that's the other side of the coin, right? Is yes, getting us to be a little bit more aware through our senses where that learning is happening as teachers, being able to really spot that through sight, through hearing, through smell, through all of those different things. But then the other piece of it is really getting to speak to it, right? Having that bravery, I guess, boldness, having really the pride and the ability to confidently convey, yeah, we made Play-Doh today, and let me tell you what that experience was like, right? Let me tell you about little Johnny measuring each cup of flour so carefully as we counted them. Let me tell you about how we practiced following the steps of a recipe, right? Really learning to do things in a sequential order. Or let me tell you about what happened when we mixed all those ingredients together, right? Here's what Johnny said. Here's what he noticed. And really helping parents understand that, wow, like all that learning happened just from making Play-Doh.
Play-Doh. And I love the other big piece that I would do with Play-Doh is, all the early writing steps that children go through.
Yeah.
And then the other things that they do with clay, first they pound it and then they roll it and then they can curl it and they can make the little balls. All those things I was able to tie. I would take pictures, and back then they were Polaroids.
Yeah.
Very important. The first time Polaroids came out. So very important to know that. But I would take pictures of that. And then I had the developmental steps up on the wall, and I'd say, look where we are. And that we would pull those things out for parent teacher conferences. And so, there's so many, and this is before I knew about documentation really well. We documented, but nothing like Reggio Emilia documents. But it was that kind of, I'm hearing, that everybody's really interested. I've been hearing lots of talk about insects we're finding on the playground. Would you like to learn more about insects? And, of course, oh yeah, blah, blah, blah. So that became, the study, right? And then, we did the KWL. What do you know about insects? What more do you want to know? And then that's where the curriculum emerged from. And we didn't teach them about insects. We read books about insects. We searched for insects outside. We had ant farms in the science area. So we could watch insects, so it was all very emergent and very child initiated through their interest. And then we just sort of, put the insects in the block area and put the insects in the tactile table and put the insects in, and read lots of books about insects and wrote down what their questions were. Yes.
Sorry, Deb.
No, that's fine. But we took pictures of all of that.
Yeah.
And so parents would go, wow, look at everything they learned about insects, because we would say, what insect names do you know in the beginning? And they would listen. And then what insects names do you know at the end? And they would list them, and we would, write them all down. And parents would go, oh my God, he was just telling me that, oh, Mom, stop, there's a blah, blah, blah. And I didn't even know what it was. Right. And there we go. Right?
Yeah. I think one of the things that's so incredible when I'm listening to your story, I'm going back to that thought of like, you learned all of that as a teacher from hearing what your children were talking about on the playground, right? From just going about and just hearing or seeing and paying attention to the little conversations that they're having, or what's really drawing them over to that dirt pile over there. Perhaps it's a family of ants, right? Carrying a crumb that they found or something like that. So it's so interesting, because I think it really brings it full circle that you learned that just by using your senses and really honing in on what you heard from your children, what you saw, what you really recognized that they were interested in. And I think that that's really important. I think it's something that we need to do as educators. Absolutely. Certainly something that we can also do as parents, right? Learning doesn't have to be, okay, they're only learning if they learn how to read or learn their alphabet or learn their numbers or learn their shapes. There's so much more to it. There's so much more to learn than just those things, like insects or how the world really works, and all of those various parts. So I love that, because again, I think it really brings that full circle. And I do find that this approach, really focusing again on those senses, certainly helpful to educators, right? It really allows us to be reflective and assess our practices and what we're using, right? Really assessing the quality of our programs, perhaps highlighting where we need to be better, be innovative, and change and grow a little bit. I really think it calls on us to not only think of where learning is happening, but how it's happening, right? Sure, it's play, but how in play is that happening, right? What are the children actually doing? And then I think it really helps build our ability to articulate it well, right? It's, we have to be able to articulate to others, especially those that don't dedicate their careers to doing what we do, being in these early childhood classrooms. We've got to be able to articulate that out to them really, really well. I love those moments as a parent where I do hear one of my girls say something and I'm like, where did you learn that? Right? Because I know I didn't sit them down to teach it. And then I get the full story. I get the whole story of how this friend and I were doing this, and then it turned into this. And it's just amazing to hear how whether it could be something as simple as a new vocabulary word that I've never heard them use.
Absolutely.
I'm always like, how did you know to use that?
And how in the world are they ever going to learn to read if we don't write things on a chart paper for them? How many do you think? What's your prediction about what's going to happen in the science experiment that I planned for you and that you may or may not have participated in? What did you think was going to happen? Or before I even do the activity, what do you think might happen? And then at the end, what really happened? And then, was our prediction right? Should we change what we thought was going to happen based on what really happened? What do you think really happened? Right? It's all written down. So parents are able to go, wow, you did a science experiment. They were talking about that. The other thing I did as a teacher and as a director, instead of writing daily notes to every parent about every child, because back then we didn't have the little apps, which I love.
Yes.
The very first thing I put on the door was ask your child about.
Love that.
Yes, because it was something that we had done that day, because, parents get in the car, what'd you do today? Play, right? And so instead, I gave them a little prompt, ask about what we painted today, or ask about the visitor we had, or ask about what we found outside, or whatever it was. And then parents and the children had a wonderful conversation about the day that wasn't just we played. They were playing.
Or you get the answer, you ask, what did you learn today? I know sometimes I'll ask my girls that, and I have to catch myself because oftentimes they'll say nothing. And it's not that they didn't really learn anything. It's just, it wasn't in the context. Like, to them, they played, they interacted, they explored, they experimented, they questioned, they did trial and error. So they did learn, but to them, that's not the right word to use, because to them it's play, and it's just what they're born to. They just innately do it, and they don't say, oh, I learned this today. They played, right? So I think that's another piece that certainly can work against us sometimes, right? When a parent gets the answer, oh, I just played, or I did nothing, it can take parents back a little bit. And I get that, because I am one. And so I've got to rephrase my questions to really understand, okay, let me ask this better.
So I have to tell a funny story about one of my stepchildren. So my second marriage, I married my husband and he had 3 teenagers. Why I put myself through 3 more teenagers, I don't know. And I tell him often, I really loved you, right? I'm an early childhood person, not a teenage person, but they were wonderful teenagers. But then he tells a story of his youngest who was reading chapter books by the time they got to kindergarten. And so Chris and his first wife were talking to this young child and saying, so how was kindergarten? And the child said, I learned about the letter T today. She's reading chapter books and she learned about the letter T, and she was so excited. And I'm like, wow, what a mismatch between what her ability is and where the teacher is in differentiating, right?
Absolutely.
And so she didn't really learn anything that day. She was reading chapter books. And so again, we have to think about where every child is, what every child is interested in, where every child's ability levels are across each of those domains of development, and how we can lift them and support them, not rush them, not try to get them from, at 4 reading chapter books. Richie was extremely bright.
Yeah.
Typically 5-year-olds do not read chapter books. So that is an unrealistic expectation for 5-year-olds. But some children, maybe one in your pre-K classroom, might be ready, but that doesn't mean all of them are. So again, it's that matching and making sure you're not mismatching between where the child is developmentally and where you're trying to get them, which is why we don't plan lessons for the whole group, right? So we offer
say that again.
We offer opportunities to explore things, and then maybe if it's an activity, I always think about my 3.5-year-olds. I didn't ever have to assess whether they could sort by type, because all I had to do was give them GORP for snack. And the very first thing they did was sort it. I never had to assess that. But I might have other activities that were not GORP to see if they could transfer that knowledge. But they could sort. They did it every time we had GORP. So it was, it was something that I could observe and then assess and then talk to families about. And I would say, so-and-so did this today. Do they do that at home? And the parent would go, yes. I said, that's a pre-math skill. That's awesome. And the parents would go, really? And I go, yeah. And so, again, it's giving them the words for what's taking place and helping them align it with, oh, that's learning.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I love that you used an example that's so that's such a routine, right? Eating meals together is such a routine. And you were able to see such an important pre-math skill happening in this everyday routine and ritual that you're doing, right? I think about my little one who loves to help fold laundry. Talk about an opportunity to match and pattern and sort things out. They love to do the socks. And what parent does not want help sorting the mounds and mounds of socks that you've got to pair up, right? So it's a win-win, right? You're getting some assistance with the laundry pile that you've got that seemingly never goes away. And your child's also getting an opportunity to practice some vital pre-math skills there that are certainly going to come up again and be more challenging later on in life as they go through those grade school years. I think often about the laundry assistance I get, and that's what I tell myself. I'm really benefiting you guys, right? I'm giving you an opportunity to practice math. That's why I'm doing this, right?
That's why I'm doing it. Well, and you're not doing it because you want them to do it. You're doing it because they like to do it, right?
Oh yeah, they love it. I mean, they love to do it.
Yes. Yeah. So, here we go. What could you do to help children develop those skills in dramatic play? All those socks that you can go and buy really cheap at Goodwill and things, you could throw them all in a basket. Maybe children would be interested in sorting socks, and there you go.
That's actually something we talk a lot about in the programs that we when we're talking with our teachers and things like that about what we offer, is that very thing. Like every parent, I'm sure, yes, going to Goodwill or those consignment places is great, but I'm sure every parent has at least once every load of laundry you dry, a couple of socks that mysteriously the mate disappears, right?
I don't know how that happens. It is truly a phenomenon that I have never been able to solve, ever been able to solve.
And I'll be like, I know I put both of those in there, right? Start to save those, right? As parents and teachers, start to save those things and adding them to your dramatic play, or having them in the math center as an opportunity to pattern and really let children show you what they know about that skill. And that's the other thing that I really love about doing these, using play as this tool for learning, is what better way to authentically see what children really know and understand than to just sort of set the stage and watch it happen, right? They're not performing for you. They're not feeling the pressure of having to answer or do something in a certain way. They're truly showing you what they know.
And it's such an authentic way to assess children.
Mhm.
And and the other thing that I hope teachers will consider is you're doing these observations all the time, right?
Yeah.
Every day. When I was a teacher, we had post-it notes, thank God, back then. And I had my little, smock on and with my post-it notes. And children played in my classroom for 2.5 hours in the morning. And that didn't count getting there and settling in. We had like an hour and a half of opening where children could play and eat breakfast if they were hungry and blah, blah, blah. And then we had another 2.5 hour big block in the afternoon. And then we had an hour outside in the morning and an hour outside in the afternoon. And
Yeah.
then everything else was whatever was left, right? So one of the things that I did all the time is I had back then, we kept portfolios and file folders, right, with every child's name on it. And I had, fine motor, gross motor, language. And I did cognitive skills in 2 or 3 categories, but not all of them. And then let's see what else would be in there, social and emotional. And then I would pick 2 children every day, 2 different children every day, and I focused on one domain of development. So I would say today I'm just going to observe Sarah and David on social skills. And then I would do my little dates and my little anecdotal record. Didn't take long because they were always socially engaged. And I'd put that in their little file folder. And that afternoon, I might do 2 other children for social development. And I do my little anecdotal records while they were playing. And I'd put that in their folder. Then the next morning, I would say, okay, I'm going to finish up, I'm going to do 4 more children today in social emotional development. And that's what I did. Every day I did notes on some domain of development. And then at the end, when it was parent teacher time, like 3 weeks before, I would get out those notes and make sure I had observed them in each domain of development. If I didn't, then I could catch up in those last few weeks on maybe Susie and Billy were absent the days I was doing something. And then I sat down and filled out the assessment report with those anecdotal records. I didn't have to say, oh my God, it's 2 weeks before parent teacher conferences. I have to do all these observations at one time. That would have driven me bonkers.
Yeah.
And so, you should be observing every day and making notes or taking photos. I mean, now it's so much easier to take.
It is, yeah. But you're right. We should be observing every day and really honing in on what are we seeing? What are we hearing? What are we smelling? What are we feeling, right? What's the overall taste or the vibe of the environment? Like all of those things have such value to add to the evidence of learning and the evidence of growth and development that's taking place in a classroom. And so that's really where we tried to bring it back to really basics. Again, I know that the classroom environment is so incredibly busy. And so you want a simple tool, a simple strategy that can really just fit into the everyday happenings of the classroom, right? You don't have to stop and say, okay, now it's time for me to smell, right? It's just things that you become a little bit more aware of, but an easy way to really hone in on the learning that's happening, right? Again, it's not just play, right? There's real value happening there. And I hope to really help bridge that gap, right? That play and learning, again, they don't live in 2 separate worlds. They happen together all the time, every day in the ECE setting and even at home.
At home, yes. And so I think the other, as we wrap up, I think the other thing that we need to be thinking about in how to translate this for families. And I think what you've done is brilliant with having them observe around what's happening with senses. I think that's relevant and meaningful to everything that they've used every day of their lives as teachers and what children use every day in their lives. I think we have to help parents understand Two, that when they're outside playing in that rich sensory environment outside, children should be outside every day, not in front of the TV,
Yes.
right? They need to be
Wholeheartedly
outside.
agree.
Their
Yeah.
senses. Yeah. And so, you know, how maybe the question is, how can you bring more sensory learning into your child's daily life? And you do that by having sand, having Play-Doh, having outside time, having having them help you in the kitchen with smells. And it was really funny in an earlier Porch Play Chat, my oldest son is old, I'm old. But when he was between he was like 12 months old to like 18 or 20 months old. When it was time to cook, he wanted to be in the kitchen with me. And so, of course, you know, you're cooking in the kitchen and that can be dangerous, you know, because of hot stuff or things that are happening on the thing. But what was so funny is I had pots and pans, and then I had plastic containers that he could play with.
Yeah.
And so as we were playing with that stuff, hey, Heather, we're just finishing up. Good to see you. You're fine. We'd love to see your face while we're finishing up. As I was cooking, he would pull out his pots and pans and his wooden spoons, and he would, you know, drum them, and he would shape them, and he would do all this stuff. And those were his really, really early experiences when he could be mobile enough to come and join me in the kitchen and to do all those things. And it was so funny. And I said, and guess what he was in band?
He was a drummer. That's amazing. Isn't it amazing when you think about it?
And you know, I just made that connection today, because to me, that's what he always did. And that's what the opportunity I always provided. Also had a drawer of, you know, all the plastic containers you can't find the lids to anymore.
Yeah, they're with the sock.
Yeah. Oh yeah, like sock. And so he would play in that drawer, and he'd put things inside and outside the pots and pans. It was hysterical. But then you know, I got to thinking about it, and I went, oh my God, he became a drummer in middle school and high school. He was a drummer in band. So then I started cracking up because I thought that was hysterical. Yeah. So you never know what opportunities that they have early on.
You never know.
It's going to end up being what they do.
Yeah, I just had a conversation. My girls are both where I'm from. They're still in summer camp for the next couple of weeks. School won't start until the end of this month. And so they must have made oobleck at camp. And my oldest said, Mommy, I just don't understand. Why does oobleck take this form when you hold it and take this form when you're not? And that started a whole conversation and really opening her mind to the term non-Newtonian liquid, right? Like, and I was like, sat there for a minute, and I was like, where did I ever think that this would be the conversation that I would be having with a 7-year-old, right? And she learned that by having the opportunity, the sensory opportunity to explore 2 different items and bring them together and watch what happens. And I'm like, what a learning experience, right? With 2 simple ingredients.
And how amazing that you actually knew the terminology.
We had to, well, I also do what I do, right? So I do what I do and was able to sort of reflect on my own time doing oobleck myself. But yeah, and then I had to, you know, really started to pull like, oh, well, you know, why does that happen? And what do you think? And all of that great stuff. But it's just so interesting that I'm like, this all started with two ingredients and teachers that let you play.
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh, stay right there while I close this out, Danielle. To learn more about IPA USA, please visit our website at ipausa.org. And until next time, keep on playing.